I grew up in a neighborhood where, unfortunately, violence was a common thing. Not normal, but common. And the reason why I say not normal is because violence isn't normal. It's just in certain neighborhoods, it can be common. Okay. And because it was so common, I got desensitized to it. So for me, my tolerance for violence was very high. All right. So when I experienced violence, even in the form of like fistfights growing up as a kid, I never interpreted it as trauma. So these things never made my list. Because again, it wasn't just about what happened to me, it was how I perceived it. I didn't perceive those type of things. However, there were things that to me were very traumatic, okay? And I always knew that violence, again, was never normal, okay? But I became desensitized to it. And there were things that were, trigger points for me. And those are the things that when I didn't allow myself to express it, and I didn't feel protected or whatever it is as a kid, these are the things that did leave a mark, because that's what trauma does. Trauma leaves a mark. And often that mark is traumatic emotions, okay? And that trauma will live in the body, as I mentioned before. So let me give you a few examples of how trauma lives in the body, okay? If your trauma leads to you creating anger, okay, then anger will live in your liver and your gallbladder. Okay, so later on in life, you may have liver and gallbladder issues. Okay, if your trauma is fear, okay, so if your trauma leads to fear, okay, programming fear into you as a result of experiencing that trauma, then the toxic emotion of fear will lead to kidney and bladder issues. Okay, that's really important as well too. And I always tell people there are also counters to these, what I will call low vibrational emotions. All right. So the counter to fear is faith. Okay. Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, most of the things that we fear are projections. They're not things that actually happen. Like, how many times have you been walking down a dark alley and saw somebody coming your way and you started to think about what could happen? Okay. Most of the times when we're in fear, or fear in a relationship, that it may go wrong, or the person may leave you or cheat on you, or whatever it may be, most of our fear is coming from the premonition of fear, like the future thought of something going wrong. Okay. So the opposite of that would be faith. It will be meaning a person in fear. And again, this will come from the trauma. Okay. And the one on my list was a trauma that led to fear. And I talk about it in my book, how the people who have the most fear are often the people who are the most dangerous and violent. Okay. So fear is a traumatic response that lives in the body, specifically in the kidneys and the bladder as well too. You also have sadness and grief. Okay, sadness and grief lives in the lungs. So a person who experienced sadness and grief, okay, this person will probably end up having asthma or have a lot of upper respiratory infections or sinus infections. Okay. All right. So it's just really important to understand how, again, these, depending on the emotion, it lives in different places in the body as well too. And then worry. So if you're a worrier, okay, you're the kind of person that worries all the time, where the toxic emotion of, or low vibrational emotion of worry, okay, will lead to living in the spleen. And the spleen is responsible for filtering the blood. Okay, it's also responsible for producing white blood cells. Okay, so you may go into your doctor and he may say, your white blood cell count is low. Okay. And no matter what you do, I mean, you're eating a perfect diet, you're exercising, you're getting enough sun, but your white blood cell count is still low. Okay, so that's another sort of physical manifestation of a low vibrational emotion or traumatic emotion as well too. Anxiety. Anxiety lives in the gut. You know that when you start to get anxiety, you feel it in the pit of your gut. Okay, so this person is going to have gut issues like irritable bowel syndrome, okay, or gut dysbiosis. Okay, so a lot of our unresolved trauma will lead to low vibrational emotions. Okay, and when I say low vibrational, we're not going to put a label of good or bad on it. It takes you out of your default setting, which is love, which is happiness, which is laughter. Okay, it takes you out of that default setting and it lowers your vibration. That's all it is. There's no need to look at it as good and bad. That's useless. Okay, but it's just really important to understand that you have to be responsible for these emotions. The same way you have to be responsible if you're drinking alcohol. Okay, you know that alcohol can lead to not only sedation, but a lowering of brain function. Okay, this is what people call tipsy. And intoxicated is the point that you cannot, not only can you not drive, you cannot walk properly. Okay, so we get drunk on these type of emotions because ultimately what happens is that we get attached to these emotions as well too. All right, so it's hugely important to understand that, again, these unresolved traumas will turn into these low vibrational emotions that live in our body and create and manifest dis-ease. All right, so now the question is why is healing trauma essential? I mean, everything that I just mentioned is sort of the answer to that, but I'm going to give you some more specific answers so that you'll understand why this is probably the foundation of what you need to do. If you try to eat a healthier diet and you always notice that despite the fact that you're like, okay, I'm pretty conventional. I do not need to be eating bread, or I do not need to be eating dairy because every time I eat it, I get constipated and I don't have bowel movements, or, I break out in my skin, or I need to stop eating meat, or I need to stop eating this, whatever it may be. You've already convinced yourself that you do not need to eat this food, but then as soon as lunch comes or dinner comes, boom, you're right back in it. And it's almost like an addiction. All right. So I'm going to break down why healing trauma is so essential. All right. So the number one reason why healing trauma is so essential to not only your physical healing, but the bigger picture, is because the healed version of you and the unhealed version of you make very different decisions. Okay. That 8-year-old version of you that experienced trauma, okay, created not only barriers and boundaries, but it created thought processes and belief systems that are still playing and functioning today in your 30-year-old version of yourself, 40-year-old version of yourself, 60, 70-year-old version of yourself, okay? And what you'll notice is when you go through this healing process, man, it's going to be eye-opening, because what you're going to wake up to is all the decisions that you've made as the unhealed version of yourself. And you may notice that you don't like some of the hobbies that you have. You may notice that you don't actually like the foods that you say that you love. You may notice that the person that you're waking up to is a stranger to you. Okay? So it's just really important to understand that, the healed version of you and the unhealed version of you, they made totally different decisions. Okay? They see life totally different. All right? It's a whole nother set of goggles. The healed version of you versus the unhealed version of you. What you see as the unhealed version of you and what you see as the healed version of you is totally different. I mean, the healed version of me, when I see somebody striking out in anger, I realize that that's a hurt person. But I can only see that in the healed version of myself. When I was the unhealed version of myself, when I saw anger, I matched that vibration, that low vibration, with the same vibration, which was anger. Okay? When somebody was aggressive with me, I would match that low vibrational signature with the same vibration. Okay? That's what I did when I was unhealed. But the healed version of me, I see with a new set of goggles. I see the truth. I see the hurt. Okay. And instead of me trying to match their vibration, because I know what damage that would not only do to them, it would do to me, because I would just be enabling them. Okay. And then I would be pulling myself down from my divine state of love and peace and happiness and joy.